Hi there, today I just want to do a quick video explaining to you newer players of Destiny 2 how the monetization in this game works, as in what you get for free, what you have to buy, what is included in each purchase, and what I recommend you should and shouldn't buy, and if you are going to buy content, when to buy it, on top of any pitfalls you might fall into. Spoiler alert, Destiny 2 is very much a free to try game as opposed to a free-to-play game. Despite it being very much marketed as a free-to-play game, most of the meat and potatoes of this game, as in the very good content, is locked behind a paywall. Before getting into the main part of the video, I would just like to give a bit of context to the new player experience. If you already know how the new player experience works, or alternatively, you already know what new players both have and don't have access to, I recommend skipping to the time on screen now. You'll start by picking your class, Titan, Hunter or Warlock, and then customize the facial appearance of your chosen character, and you'll then be thrown into the Cosmodrome to do the game's opening campaign. I recommend not buying any form of additional content for this game until completing this campaign, as ultimately if you don't like the gameplay of Destiny, it doesn't really matter how high quality some of the content later on in the game gets. However, I'd argue this rarely happens, as Destiny's aesthetic, music, abilities, and especially the gunplay have all been incredible in this game, and while this is largely my own opinion, it is one shared by many in the gaming space, both fans and haters of the franchise. This has also remained a constant throughout the entirety of the game's lifespan. You should note that you can also skip this campaign if you want to after completing the second mission, which is about 45 minutes of game time. However, I personally wouldn't recommend this on your first playthrough, as you should get an idea of the gameplay of the game first. However, if you want to get into the meat and potatoes of the game early on, feel free. If you do choose to skip the campaign, you will be granted a choice of one of 3 packs from Ikora, a vendor you will be teleported to in the tower, the game's social space. These 3 packs are based off Arc, Solar or Void, which are 3 elements in the game, and the 3 starting subclasses are based off these 3 elements. You should pick the pack that looks the most cool to you, to be honest. However, if you want to be optimal, I would recommend the Solar pack, aka the orange one, because it grants Sunshot, a very good exotic hand cannon. Okay, that was a lot of context. However, I thought it was important to mention it, so a new player, especially someone who has never played Destiny before that is watching this video, has an idea of what's going on in the first hour of the game. That brings us to now if you skipped the campaign or if you finished the campaign, where we can now talk about what a new player does and doesn't have access to. Let's start with what they do have access to. You will have access to every single destination. However, do not think this means that you have access to all of the content on this destination. For example, every expansion comes with a raid. There's a raid on Neptune, Europa, Seraphim's Throne World, the Moon, and the Dreaming City. But these raids you will not have access to unless you own the expansion associated with said raid. What are raids? Well, a raid is a 6-man activity with a mix of both boss and non-boss encounters, with mechanics that are typically more impactful and as a result more complicated than the typical strike mechanic, for example. And the big difference between raids and other content in the game is you are not told what to do. You, as a new player, will start with 3 raids for free: the Vault of Glass, Crota's End, and King's Fall, all of which were Destiny 1 raids that have been brought up to Destiny 2 standards. You also will have access to one of the 9 dungeons in the game, Prophecy. If you don't know what a dungeon is, think of it as raids but with 3 people instead of 6 and slightly simpler mechanics, because unlike a raid, a dungeon can be soloed if you are good enough, and there is additional loot that comes from soloing the dungeon, especially if you solo it without dying. That is pretty much all the content you have as a new player. The only other thing is Dares of Eternity, which is a 6-player activity that is free to everyone, and it has some additional loot tied to it. There's not really much to explain, and I'd like you to experience it yourself if you've played this game, or if you choose to play this game, because it's actually a pretty cool activity. That may not sound like a lot, but that is 3 raids, a dungeon, and all the loot associated with it, on top of a bunch of world drops, which is just random loot that can drop. You also have access to Crucible, which is Destiny 2's PvP. You have access to Gambit, which is a PvEVP mode, and you have access to Strikes, which are 3-man missions that are a lot simpler than dungeons. Big note with strikes, however, is the hardest version of strikes called Nightfalls. You will only be able to play the Nightfall if you own the DLC that is associated with that strike. For example, the strike that is available this week is tied to the Witch Queen expansion. So if you did not own Witch Queen, you will not be able to play the Nightfall this week, which is a very stupid mechanic in the game, but it's here nonetheless. The final thing worth mentioning when it comes to free content is the Moon and Europa both have campaigns that were tied to expansions, but they are now free to play for everyone, which grants people access to the Stasis subclass upon completing the Beyond Light campaign found on Europa. However, again, just because these campaigns are free does not mean that you have all of the content for these destinations. The exotic quests that are tied to these destinations, on top of the raids and in the Moon's case the dungeon, you will still have to own the expansion in order to have access to these forms of content. Okay, finally, I can get into why I wanted to make this video in the first place, which is explaining how Destiny's DLC content works, what to buy, when to buy it, how to buy it, as in how to buy it for the least amount of money possible, etc, etc, etc. However, before I get into that, the final thing I want to do is explain what everything on this screen is. It's because if you are a new player, you probably don't have a clue. You'll notice that there are three main things on this screen: dungeon keys, expansions, and packs. Let me talk about packs first. The 30th anniversary pack I'm actually going to talk about at the very end, because it's not really like anything else on this page. These are the three main packs: the Forsaken pack, the Shadowkeep pack, and the Beyond Light pack. These packs were expansions, but they've been changed to packs because some of their content has either been made free or removed. The Forsaken pack used to be Forsaken, the DLC. However, the Tangled Shore, one of the two destinations associated with this DLC, and the campaign have been removed. You are now buying this pack for the exotics, the raid, and the dungeon, on top of some content that is available on the Dreaming City. For Shadowkeep and Beyond Light, as mentioned before, their campaigns, and in Beyond Light's case the Stasis subclass, have been made free for everyone. That's why they are called packs, and they got a price drop because now you are paying for less content. Next thing on this screen are the actual expansions. These are what the packs used to be, but they haven't had any content removed. They just had a price drop because they are no longer the newest expansion in Lightfall and Witch Queen's cases. The third DLC or expansion is the newest one, the Final Shape. You'll notice here for me it says Final Shape plus Annual Pass. If you do not own Final Shape or the Annual Pass, you will have two options here. One is just Final Shape, and one is this one. The difference between the two is both include the Final Shape DLC, which is the destinations, content, the Pale Hearts content, the campaign, the raid, the exotic missions, the loot, etc, 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 along with the Prismatic subclass. The Annual Pass, however, comes with Final Shape, plus the 3 episodes, which are essentially the 3 seasons for the year, basically the content we get throughout the year in between expansions. You will also get access to the Final Shape Dungeon Key if you buy the Annual Pass. Now, what are Dungeon Keys? Now, Dungeon Keys are the final 3 things here. You can see the Final Shape Dungeon Key, the Lightfall Dungeon Key, and the Witch Queen Dungeon Key. These keys each contain 2 dungeons. I mentioned before there were 9 dungeons. One is free, one is tied to Shadowkeep, one is tied to Forsaken. The others are tied to these. There is a 10th dungeon coming out soon, but not yet. As mentioned at the start of this section, I said I would talk about the 30th anniversary pack at the end, which is now what I will do. The 30th anniversary pack contains 2 pieces of content. The third is the final dungeon. As I mentioned before, Shadowkeep has a dungeon, Forsaken has a dungeon, Prophecy is free, and then these keys all contain 2. You may notice that adds up to 10, and I said 9 earlier. That's because the second dungeon of the Final Shape dungeon key has not released yet. That will be releasing in roughly 12 weeks' time. We don't have an exact date yet. So, 30th anniversary pack comes with the Grasp of Avarice dungeon, and it also comes with some additional loot. In the activity I mentioned earlier, Dead's Fraternity, completing it will grant you keys. These keys can be used to either get more drops of the weapons, which you can do if you're a free-to-play player, but there's also an armor set for each class, plus a ghost ship and sparrow that can only be earned through opening certain chests in a social space, and these chests can only be opened with keys, but you will not be allowed to open these chests if you do not open open this pack. You are essentially paying £22 for a dungeon, plus a bunch of cosmetics, including 2 armor sets, one given to you for free, one earned through the keys, plus a ghost ship and sparrow. It's one of those ones where if you want to own all of the content in the game, you will buy this because it has a dungeon, and dungeons are the best content in the game. But for a new player, this is no way what you should be buying first. As for what you should and shouldn't be buying, that leads us on to the next section. Okay, finally, I get to talk about the pricing of these DLCs and packs. Something you may notice though at this screen, first of all, is the Steam page, obviously. There's no dungeon keys here. That is because if you want the dungeon keys, at least the first two, the Lightfall and Witch Queen one, you must come here to the silver page and buy this bundle if you want both of them, or this bundle if you only want one of the keys. If you are only getting one of the keys, I recommend getting the Lightfall one, because newer weapons in Destiny 2 are typically better, and personally I think that those two dungeons are better than the 2 Witch Queen dungeons. But either way, despite that, this is the only way to get those 2 dungeon keys. If you want the Lightfall dungeon key, you can buy it that way as well, but it is also included in the Final Shape annual pass, which means that it is included in the Light and Darkness collection, which is essentially the Everything bundle. But it's ironic calling it the Everything bundle because it does not include the Witch Queen and the Lightfall dungeon key, but it does include the Final Shape dungeon key. Yeah, it's very confusing. I mentioned before that the annual pass upgrade has some problems, and here are the problems with it. The annual pass and all the dungeon keys include the 3 episodes for the year, which are essentially the 3 seasons. Now, you get one of these with Final Shape for free. If you just buy Final Shape, whatever the current episode is, which is currently episode 2, you get that for free. That's not a bad thing, inherently. However, the only way to get these episodes is through either getting Final Shape and getting the current one, or the annual pass and getting the third one. This means that if you want to get episode 1, which was the last episode, the only way to get it is through this bundle here, which in all is 84 quid. The problem with that is, let's say for example you're a relatively new player, and you've just logged in, people are all talking about the newest dungeon, which is actually very good, you buy the Final Shape dungeon key. Because the dungeon key is something bought in-game, and it's not bought on the Steam store, Steam will not recognise you have bought it, and the annual pass price will not drop. This is different to if it was on the Steam store. For example, when you buy Final Shape, if you buy Final Shape just on its own, an option that you can see up here, the Final Shape annual pass upgrade, will become available, which is essentially paying half the price to get the annual pass plus the dungeons because you already own the DLC. But let's say you own Final Shape and you bought the dungeon key separately. This pack here will still cost £42 because you did not buy the dungeon key on Steam, so Steam does not recognise you already own it because you can't buy the dungeon pass on Steam. The biggest problem with Destiny 2's DLCs, well, there's 2 of them. One is the pricing. Like, look at this pricing. It doesn't even include everything. It doesn't include 4 of the dungeons. And B, certain things aren't even listed here. Like, what? So, what should you actually buy? Well, if you want everything, you either buy this and then come here and buy this for the 2 dungeons. If you want to get everything but not in one go, there's 3 things you buy. The Final Shape Plus Annual Pass, which comes with all of the content for this year. The Legacy Collection, which comes with most of the content that launched pre-June 4th, that was Final Shape's release date, and then you come and buy this for the 2 dungeon keys. You'll notice every avenue leads to this. If you want those final 2 dungeon keys, which I do recommend if you are debating being a hardcore, because Duality, Spire, Ghost of the Deep and Warlords are all very good dungeons, but it's still 25 quid for just 4 activities, and for someone who's not for someone who's not really into Destiny that much, that is a very big ask. So, what do I recommend you actually buy as a brand new player? It honestly depends on how much money you want to fork out, but personally, the biggest recommendation is probably Final Shape. Yes, it is 42 quid, but that is a lot less than a lot of AAA games, and I would argue that Final Shape is better than most AAA games. That is obviously my own opinion. You should go do your own research before making that conclusion for yourself. But the Salvation's Edge raid is incredible. The campaign is solid. Because it's the newest campaign, doing it on the Legend difficulty will get you gear close to the new power cap. The exotics are very good. Dual Destiny, I'm not going to spoil what that is for new players, but Dual Destiny Destiny is one of the best pieces of content they have ever added to this game. It is incredible. If you wanted to get just a small feel for the game, like just a very small one, I recommend the Forsaken pack. It comes with a raid that has very good weapons, and it's one of the bigger raids. It comes with the first dungeon. Now, because it is the first dungeon, I recommend doing it solo and not in a group. It will be a lot better in a solo. The dungeon is kind of a stomp. It also comes with a bunch of exotic weapons. You also, these are the exotic weapons, by the way. You also get free Forsaken ciphers. This is the only thing on the Bungie store that does this. And what those Forsaken ciphers are is, with the exception of raid weapons, you can pick 3 exotics here for free. I would personally recommend getting Bad Juju, Izanagi's Burden, and Lumina. But you should read through the weapons and honestly pick which is the most fun looking to you. You can focus about the meta later on. The final thing that I should note about Destiny's microtransactions is there are often bundles such as the Revenant Silver Bundle, the Triumphant Silver Bundle, the Throne of Atheon Bundle. These are just cosmetics with some silver. Do not waste your money on them. They are not worth it. Please do not buy them. This is a troll. Do not do this. This is a big troll. If you've made it to the end of this video, first of all, thank you. Second of all, what did we learn? First of all, you should know the difference between a pack, an actual expansion, and a dungeon key. And 2, you should have learnt how bullshit Bungie is when it comes to how you buy expansions. The fact that you cannot buy a dungeon key in the Steam store, and the fact you cannot buy old episodes, essentially old seasons, in the store, potentially forces people to spend more money on the game than they should, like I mentioned before, if you buy the Final Shape dungeon key, and you want to then get episode 1, and then you have to buy the annual pass upgrade, but you already have the dungeon key, and the price doesn't decrease with that. It is bullshit. On top of this, by not having them in the store, they have an excuse to not include them in the Light and Darkness combined pack, which gives them an excuse to make even more money. Now don't get me wrong, I love this game, and if you love the gameplay, I fully believe that you will love the endgame content. But no game out there is worth 150 quid, and that's in pounds, not even dollars. Even Elden Ring, I don't think is worth that much. Even Hollow Knight, I don't think is worth that much. So, if you are looking to get into this game, I do recommend it. But don't buy it unless it's on sale. At the time we recorded this video yesterday, or technically 2 days ago now, the Black Friday sale was done, and that is the biggest sale of the year. But they still do a lot of sales. Every time a new content update comes out, they typically do a sale, with the next one, as I mentioned before, being in roughly 11 to 12 weeks. If you are looking to get into the game, get in then when it is on sale. And also, if you're a bit on the fence, you like the gameplay but you don't know about the high-end content, maybe only buy 1 pack. Do not buy everything at once and then end up in a scenario where you don't enjoy it and now you've just spent 150 quid. It is not worth it. I am sorry for the more depressing video, because I love this game. It is my hobby. I've played it for over 10 years. I want more people to play it, but I cannot recommend this game unless it is on sale. If it's on sale, I would recommend this among the best, but Destiny has its flaws, and its microtransactions and DLC page are no exception. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to subscribe, I'd appreciate it, and see you around.